Clara Bellwether had only one glove left when the winter wind turned cruel enough to uncover what she had tried to bury. At the edge of Bitter Creek Depot, snow peeled back from the frozen ground and revealed a small footprint beside a blackened scrap of ledger paper, the same ledger the town believed she had stolen before running from the rancher who had sent for her. By sunrise, men were calling her a liar, a thief, and a mail-order bride with no intention of becoming any man's wife. But Elias Rourke saw something in that footprint no angry crowd bothered to notice. It was too small to belong to Clara, and it pointed toward the mountains. Before we begin, let me know where you are watching from. Leave your country name in the comments below. And if you love stories about courage, loyalty, and community, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next stories. The wind came down from the high white ridges like a living thing, slipping under doors, rattling loose shutters, and scraping snow across the boardwalks of Bitter Creek. It pushed through the cracks of the depot walls and made the kerosene lanterns tremble. It carried the lonely whistle of the eastbound train, long after the train itself had vanished into gray morning. Clara Bellwether stood on the back platform, with her carpet bag clutched under one arm and her bare right hand tucked inside her sleeve. Her left glove was still on, patched twice at the tomb. The black wool worn thin enough to show the pale shape of her knuckles. She had lost the other glove sometime before dawn, might be while climbing through the drift behind the freight shed, might be while scraping snow over the little metal box she had hidden beneath the woodpile. She had not meant to run. That was what she kept telling herself, though every breath she took proved otherwise. She had run from the depot. She had run from the wagon Elias Rourke had sent. She had run from the question waiting in his eyes when he first saw her step down from the train 2 nights ago, pale and shaking, with a marriage letter in her pocket and terror she could not hide. The letter had been real enough, folded soft from being read too many times, written in a plain, strong hand. Miss Clara Bellwether, if you still wish to come west, I will meet you at Bitter Creek Station. I cannot promise fiery, but I can promise a roof that does not leak, honest work, food on the table, and my name, if you can accept it. I need a wife who does not frighten easy. She had read those words in a boarding house room in St. Louis while sleep tapped the window. She had read them with a little boy asleep in the chair beside her, his cheek pressed to a coat too thin for winter. She had read them like a door opening. Then she had reached Bitter Creek and seen a man from her old life step out of the shadows near the freight office. Silas Cree's man, not Silas himself, but one of the 2 hard-faced riders who had stood outside the Denver counting room the night fire took the ledgers and Mr. Latham's life. He had a scar under his eye and a habit of rubbing his thumb over a silver watch chain. Clara had seen him through smoke, seen him laugh while the flames ate paper, wood, promises, debts, names. She had seen him carry away what he thought mattered and leave behind the burned book that proved Silas Creed had ruined families with forged notes and false mortgages. Clara had saved what she could. Half a ledger burned along one side. Enough names, enough figures, enough to hang a powerful man if any judge would listen to a woman accused of theft. So when she saw that scar-faced rider in Bitter Creek, she had known the truth. The West had not hidden her. It had led him straight to her. Now the town was waking. Doors opened, stove smoke lifted from chimneys. A bell rang once from the church steeple, dull and hollow under the clouds. Clara pressed herself behind the freight shed and watched Mrs. Holcomb from the boarding house cross the street with a shawl around her shoulders. 2 boys ran past carrying kindling. A dog barked somewhere in the livery. A horse struck its hoof against a stall board. Then she saw Elias Rourke. He came down Main Street with snow on the brim of his black hat and a sheepskin coat hanging open despite the cold. He was tall, broad through the shoulders, and too quiet for a town that liked noise. His face looked cut from weathered stone, not unkind but not soft either. A scar crossed the bridge of his nose, pale against winter-brown skin. He led his horse instead of riding it, and he paused at the depot steps exactly where Clara had stood the night before. A man in a banker's coat hurried behind him. "That woman took something from the freight office," the banker called. "Ask the agent." She was seen. She ran before daylight. Clara's heart knocked against her ribs. The banker was Milton Ray, Bitter Creek's money man and Silas Creed's local partner. Though most people in town only knew him as the owner of the cleanest boots and the largest safe, Clara had seen his name in the ledger. More than once, the burned pages in the metal box could prove it. Elias turned slowly. "What did she take?" "A book," Ray said. "Or papers. Something she had no business touching." The depot agent, old Mr. Peavy, shuffled out with his muffler tied up to his ears. "I only saw her near the woodpile. Wind was howling. Couldn't say what she had." "She is my intended wife," Elias said, and Clara flinched at the steadiness in his voice. "Not tender, not possessive, just plain as a fence post. Until I hear from her, I'll thank you not to hang a crime on her shoulders." Ray's mouth thinned. "You might regret tying your name to hers." "I regret most things after breakfast," Elias said. "This ain't breakfast." A few townspeople laughed nervously, but the laugh died when a gust of wind slammed loose snow across the depot yard. It tore at the drift behind the freight shed, scooped it low, and sent white powder spinning over Clara's hiding place. She looked down too late. The wind had uncovered tracks, not just hers. A small footprint showed in the crusted snow near the woodpile, narrow and shallow. The print of a child's boot. Clara went cold in a way the weather had not caused. Finn. He must have followed her in the dark. He must have climbed down from the empty stock car where she had hidden him, frightened and silent, and come looking for her after she fled the depot. The wind shifted again. A charred paper scrap skittered loose from beneath the woodpile and fluttered into the open yard. Elias saw it. So did Milton Ray. Clara moved before thinking. She stepped out from behind the freight shed, reaching for the scrap with her bare hand. But Ray shouted, "There! Stop her!" Every head turned. For one breath, Clara and Elias looked at each other across the snow. She expected anger. She expected judgment. He had every right. He had sent for a bride, and she had repaid him with absence, secrets, and town scandal. But his gaze dropped from her face to her bare hand, red with coal, then to the child's footprint, then to the burned paper trembling against a fence rail. When he looked back at her, his voice was low. "Miss Bellwether," he said. "Who else was with you?" Clara could not answer. Behind the livery, the scar-faced rider stepped into view, one hand under his coat, his eyes fixed on the scrap of ledger paper. That was when Clara ran again. Not because she lacked courage, because somewhere beyond the depot yard, a little boy who had not spoken since the Denver fire was alone in a country that could swallow grown men whole. She fled through the alley behind the mercantile, boots slipping on packed snow, breath tearing from her lungs. Behind her, men shouted. Elias called her name once, but he did not shout like the others. He said it like a man trying not to spook a frightened horse. Clara cut past the blacksmith shop and crossed behind the church, where the bell ropes slapped in the wind. She had hidden Finn before sunrise in the old schoolhouse north of town, telling him to wait under the teacher's desk until she returned. She had meant to fetch the ledger box, find the sheriff, and tell the truth before Silas Creed's men could silence her. But truth was not a lantern a person could simply lift. Truth could burn the hand that carried it. By the time she reached the wash beyond town, her skirt was stiff with snow and her right hand had gone numb. She stumbled, caught herself against a cottonwood, and heard a hoarse snicker behind her. Elias Rourke sat in the saddle 10 yards back, reins loose, rifle in the boot beside his knee. He had not brought the crowd. He had not brought Ray. He had come alone. "I won't drag you back," he said. Clara pressed a palm to her side. "Then why follow?" Because that was a child's track, she closed her eyes. He swung down from the horse. I asked the child yours. No, is he in danger? Yes? The answer came before fear could stop it. Elias heard enough in that one word to change the set of his jaw. He reached into his coat, pulled out a spare pair of leather gloves, and tossed them to her. Put those on. She stared at them. Your hand is near frozen. I cannot take charity from you. It ain't charity. It's sense. She put the gloves on because pride did not warm fingers. They were too large, lined with wool, carrying the smell of horse smoke and pine. She hated that such a small comfort nearly made her cry. Elias stepped closer, but not too close. Tell me where the child is. If do will be mixed in this, Miss Bellwether. I am already standing in the snow with a runaway bride, a banker calling for her arrest, and a burned ledger page blowing around town like the devil's own calling card. I expect I missed. Her mouth trembled despite herself. A gunshot cracked from somewhere behind them. Snow kicked from the cottonwood trunk near Elias's shoulder. He moved fast. One hand seized Clara's arm and pulled her down behind the bank of the wash. His horse jerked back, reins dragging. Another shot cracked, then a third. Creed's man, Clara whispered. Elias did not ask who Creed was. He listened, eyes narrowed toward the ridge. Can you ride? Yes. Then we get the child first. Explanations can bleed later. He lifted her onto the horse and swung up behind her in one motion. The animal lunged forward as another bullet hissed through the cottonwood branches. Clara gripped the saddle horn, the cold air knifing her throat, while Elias guided the horse through the wash, keeping low until the ridge hid them from town. The old schoolhouse stood where the prairie began to climb, a one-room building with broken shutters and a bell rusted still above the door. Snow had drifted against the steps. Clara slid down before Elias could help and pushed inside. Finn, she called softly. No answer. Inside, the room smelled of dust, old chalk, and mouse nests. Desks sat crooked in rows. A faded map of the territory sagged on one wall. Beneath the teacher's desk lay the blanket she had wrapped around him. Empty. Clara dropped to her knees. No, she whispered. No, no, no. Elias crouched beside her. He touched the snow tracked across the floorboards, then the sill of the rear window. Small boots went out here. One set, then a man's boots came after. Clara's breath stopped. Did the boy know to hide from strangers? Elias asked. He knows not to speak. Can he speak? Clara swallowed. He has not spoken since the fire. Elias's expression changed. Not pity exactly. Something quieter. Something that understood wounds did not always show blood. His full name, Finn Bellwether. My sister's boy. The ledger is about him. Clara looked toward the broken window, where the child's tracks vanished beneath wind-blown snow. It is about all of us, she said. But Silas Creed will kill him for it if he thinks Finn remembers what he saw. Elias took that in without flinching. Outside, the wind dragged snow over the prints, erasing direction by inches. He stood. My ranch is closer than town, and whoever took him will avoid Main Street. There's an old freight road north. If they're heading for Creed's winter camp, they'll pass the Rourke line. You know where they went? I know where men go when they think no one is watching. He stepped outside and whistled for his horse. Clara followed, numb with fear, guilt, and the awful knowledge that she had tried so hard to protect Finn. She had left him alone. As Elias helped her mount, she said, Why are you doing this? He looked up at her, one boot in the stirrup, eyes dark under his hat brim. Because a child's footprint was the only honest thing I saw in that depot yard. The Rourke ranch sat in a shallow valley where the wind lost some of its teeth against a stand of pines. The house was built of squared logs with a stone chimney, not fine, but solid. Corrals stretched behind it, A barn leaned into the weather with yellow lantern light showing through the cracks. Cattle stood dark and heavy along the fence line, their backs dusted white. A woman came onto the porch as Elias rode in with Clara. She was thin, silver-haired, and wrapped in a gray shawl, her posture straight enough to shame a soldier. "Elias," she called, "the town's already sent word." "Then town's faster than usual," he said, dismounting. Her gaze moved to Clara. Not cruel, not welcoming, measuring. "This is Miss Bellwether," Elias said. "She needs warmth and coffee." The woman's brows lifted. "Not a preacher, not today, Aunt Liddy." Aunt Liddy's eyes sharpened, but she stepped aside. "Then bring her in before she freezes on my porch." Inside, the ranch house held the smell of coffee, wood smoke, and bread. It was plainer than Clara had imagined from Elias's letter. Pegs by the door held work coats. A rifle rested above the mantel. A Bible lay open on a side table beside mending. Everything bore the mark of use, not display. Clara stood near the stove, ashamed of the snow melting from her hem onto the clean floor. Aunt Liddy handed her a cup. "Drink, thank you. You caused a stir." Clara looked down. "Yes, ma'am. Did you mean to?" "No." "Good. I have little patience for accidental fools, but less for purposeful ones." Elias removed his coat. "Liddy, what? I am being kind." Clara almost smiled into the cup. That almost smile was the first warmth she had felt all day. Elias spread a map on the table and weighted the corners with a knife, a tin cup, and a horseshoe. "Tell me about Creed." Clara sat because her knees had begun to shake. For a moment, the words would not come. She had told parts of the story in her head 100 times to sheriffs, judges, ministers, strangers. In every telling, someone believed her. In real life, no one had. "Silas Creed buys debt," she began. "Bad debt, farm debt, railroad debt, widow debt. He lends through men like Milton Ray, then changes figures after families sign. If they cannot pay, he takes land, cattle, shops, anything." My sister and her husband kept books for Latham Freight in Denver. I helped copy accounts. We saw names repeated, same loans, different counties, same witnesses, dead men's signatures. And Liddy stopped pretending not to listen. Clara continued. "Mr. Latham meant to take the ledger to a territorial judge. That night, the office burned. My sister died 3 days later from smoke in her lungs. Her husband was already dead in the fire. Finn saw men leaving through the alley. One had a scar under his eye. One carried a silver watch chain. Silas Creed told the sheriff I stole money and set the fire to hide it." "Did the sheriff believe him?" Elias asked. "The sheriff owed him." Silence settled over the room, heavy as a quilt. "And the ledger?" Elias asked. "I saved part of it. Burned but readable. I hid it at the depot because Cree's men searched my bag on the train before Bitter Creek. I thought if I carried it straight to the sheriff here, I would be safe." And Liddy gave a dry laugh. "Sheriff Denner plays cards with Milton Ray every Thursday." Clara closed her eyes. Elias tapped the map. "Duh. Why come here as a bride?" "My cousin answered the advertisement for me," Clara said. "She thought a husband's name might protect me and Finn." "I thought so too. Then I saw Creed's man at the station. You should have told me. I had known you for less than 1 minute." "That minute might have been enough for you, my boy," she said, the answer sharper than she meant. "I have watched honest men look away from fire because the man holding the match owned their debt." Elias did not answer right away. Aunt Liddy set more wood in the stove. "That is fair." Elias glanced at her. "It is," she said. "You roar. Men think your silence passes for trustworthiness. To frightened women, it often passes for judgment." Clara looked at her then, surprised. Liddy shrugged. I was frightened once. I remember. The practical work began because fear could not be allowed to sit idle. Elias sent 2 hands to watch the North Freight Road and told his foreman Caleb to saddle fresh horses. Caleb Rourke, Elias' younger cousin, came in stamping snow off his boots and stopped when he saw Clara at the table. "So she did come here. She is here," Elias said. Caleb's face hardened. "Ray says she stole from the depot." "Ray says many things. He also says the bank will call your note if you shelter her." Aunt Lydia's mouth tightened. Clara looked at Elias. "Your ranch is in debt? Most ranches are in winter. Because of Ray. Because cattle die, fences break, and grass does not grow under snow," Elias said. "Ray holds the note." Caleb took off his hat. "Elias think we barely made the last payment. If Ray calls the note, we lose the north pasture by spring." Clara stood. "I should leave." Elias turned on her. "Sit down. You cannot risk your ranch for a stranger. You are not leaving this house half frozen with men shooting at you." Caleb looked between them. "She is not your wife." "No," Elias said. "But she is under my roof." Something in the room shifted when he said that. Clara felt it, and so did Caleb. The words did not claim her as property, nor as obligation. They drew a line at the threshold. On one side, winter, debt, accusation. On the other, a table, a stove, and a man who would not hand her back to wolves for convenience. A rider came in near dusk with news. Small tracks had been found near Rourke's north fence. A man's tracks beside them. The trail turned toward an abandoned line shack once used by freighters before the railroad came. Smoke had been seen there. Clara was on her feet before the rider finished. Elias caught her coat from the peg and held it out. "You stay behind me. I will not stay behind any man while Finn is afraid." His gaze met hers. "Then stay beside me and do as I say when bullets start." Caleb swore under his breath. "This is madness." "No," Aunt Lydia said, reaching for the rifle above the mantel. "Madness is letting bankers decide which children are worth saving." They rode out under a bruised purple sky. Snow had stopped falling, but the wind moved constantly, ghosting across the prairie, blurring every track almost as soon as it formed. Clara rode one of Elias's steady ranch mares. She was not graceful, but she stayed mounted. Elias rode ahead. Caleb and 2 hands spread wide behind. The line shack sat among bare cottonwoods near a frozen creek. No smoke showed now. No horse stood outside. Elias raised a hand, and everyone halted. Then Clara heard it. A faint tapping. Not a voice, not a cry. 3 taps. A pause. 3 taps again. Her breath caught. Finn had done that after the fire, tapping on walls when nightmares stole his voice. She slid from the saddle and ran. Elias caught up at the door and pushed in first, revolver drawn. The shack was empty except for a broken chair, old ashes, and a trapdoor half covered by a torn flour sack. The tapping came from below. Clara dropped to her knees. "Finn." A muffled sound answered. Elias lifted the trapdoor. Cold cellar air breathed upward. Finn crouched at the bottom of a shallow root pit, wrapped in his coat, eyes huge in his soot-pale face. A rope had been tied around one ankle and fastened to a beam, not cruel enough to injure, only cruel enough to keep him. Clara climbed down and gathered him against her. He trembled but made no sound. His small hands clutched the front of her coat. "I came back," she whispered into his hair. "I came back, my darling. I am sorry. I am so sorry." Elias looked away, giving them the mercy of not being watched. Caleb found something under the broken chair. "Elias," it was Clara's missing glove. Inside it was tucked a folded scrap of burned ledger paper. Clara stared. That was not there. Elias took the paper carefully. One edge had burned black, but lines of ink remained. M. Ray, received transfer from S. Creed, Rourke North Pasture held under altered note, original paid. Caleb's face changed. Original paid? Aunt Lydia had not ridden with them, but Clara could almost hear her sharp intake of breath. Elias read the line twice. His expression went still, and Clara understood that stillness now. It was not emptiness. It was a man holding back a storm until he knew where to let it break. My father died believing he left us in debt, Elias said quietly. He sold horses, cattle, my mother's piano, worked himself into the ground over that north pasture. Clara reached for the paper. There is more in the ledger. Many names, yours, the widow Mercer's, the church building fund, the livery. Caleb whispered. Ray robbed half this town. A rifle cracked outside. One of the ranch hands shouted. Elias shoved the ledger scrap into Clara's hand. Sell her, now. Clara pulled Finn down with her as bullets struck the shack walls, punching splinters through the dim room. Elias and Caleb fired back from the doorway and broken window. Horses screamed. Men cursed among the cottonwoods. Finn pressed his face against Clara's shoulder. She held him tight, one hand over the ledger scrap inside her glove, as if paper could have a heartbeat. Through the cracks above, she saw boots move. Heard Elias shout for Caleb to swing left. Heard another voice answer from outside. Give us the woman and the boy. Rourke, this ain't your quarrel. Elias's reply came cold and clear. You crossed my fence. That makes it my quarrel. The fight did not last long, though fear stretched it into a lifetime. Creed's men had expected a frightened woman, my BB, one rancher. They had not expected Rourke, hands firing from both sides, or Caleb coming through the creek bed with a shotgun. One outlaw dropped his rifle and ran. Another took a bullet in the leg and cursed until Caleb tied him with a saddle rope. The scar-faced man escaped into the timber. By full dark, they returned to the ranch with Finn wrapped in Elias's coat. The captured outlaw tied belly down over a horse, and the ledger scrap hidden beneath Clara's bodice. No one spoke much on the ride. But when they reached the porch, Finn, still silent, reached from Clara's arms toward Elias. Elias froze. Clara whispered. He wants you to carry him. The big rancher looked almost frightened by that small trust. Then he lifted Finn carefully, as if the boy were made of blown glass, and carried him inside. The next morning, Bitter Creek turned against Clara in the way towns often did when fear wore its Sunday clothes. By 9 o'clock, women stood in clusters outside the mercantile, whispering. By 10, Milton Ray had nailed a notice beside the church steps, offering a reward for stolen banking records and naming Clara Bellwether as a fugitive wanted for questioning in connection with arson, theft, and fraud. By noon, Sheriff Danner rode to the Rourke Ranch with 2 deputies and a face full of apology. He did not mean. Elias met him in the yard. Clara watched from the kitchen window with Aunt Liddy beside her and Finn sitting at the table, drawing circles in spilled flour. You do not have to face them, Liddy said. Yes, I do. Not alone. Clara looked at the older woman, and Liddy took her shawl from the peg. I said you do not have to face them alone. That is different. They stepped onto the porch as Sheriff Danner cleared his throat. Elias, I've got an order to bring Miss Bellwether in. From a judge, from Milton Ray, pending the circuit judge. Ray is not law, no. But he is the complainant. He is a thief, Caleb said from near the barn. Danner frowned. Careful. Clara came down the steps. Her legs shook, but her voice did not. Sheriff, if you take me into town, Silas Creed's men will take the boy. Danner glanced at Finn, who watched from behind the curtain. The boy is not named in the complaint. He is named in the ledger. Ray rode into the yard then, wrapped in a fur collar, his cheeks red from coal. Behind him came the star-faced rider, now pretending to be just another hired guard. Clara's stomach twisted. That woman is dangerous, Ray said. She has bewitched this household with lies. Elias took one step forward. Use another word. Ray ignored him. She carries stolen pages from a Denver firm and has likely forced your name into them by now. Ask yourself why she ran from you, Rourke. Ask yourself what sort of woman answers a marriage advertisement with a child hidden in a freight car and a burned book in her baggage. The words struck because they held enough truth to wound. Clara had hidden Finn. She had hidden the ledger. She had run. The deputies looked uncertain. Caleb looked angry. Aunt Liddy looked like she would happily brain Ray with a stove iron. Elias turned to Clara. He did not ask in front of them. His eyes asked privately, giving her one last chance to keep silent. She stepped off the porch. I ran, she said. Not because I meant to deceive Mr. Rourke, because the man behind Mr. Ray was waiting at the depot. She pointed at the scar-faced rider. That man helped burn Latham Freight in Denver. He tied my nephew in a line shack yesterday. He shot at Mr. Rourke. If you want a criminal, sheriff, start with him. The rider laughed. A scare woman's tale. Finn appeared in the doorway. No one had heard him come. He stared at the scar-faced man. His small face went white. Clara moved toward him, but he lifted one trembling finger and pointed. For the first time since Denver, Finn spoke. Fireman, he whispered. The yard went still. The scar-faced rider's laugh died. Ray recovered first. Children repeat what they are told. Finn's voice cracked, but he said it again. Fireman. Then he looked at Clara. He took Papa's book. Clara covered her mouth with her hand. Elias moved before anyone else. When the rider reached for his gun, Elias struck him hard enough to send him into the snow. Caleb had the man's pistol kicked away before Sheriff Danner remembered. He was sheriff. Arrest him, Elias said. Danner hesitated, and Liddy stepped down beside Clara. Sheriff, this yard is full of witnesses, and if you choose the banker over the child, Bitter Creek will hear of that too. Danner swallowed. Tie him. The deputies obeyed, but Ray was not finished. His face had gone pale beneath its polish, yet his voice sharpened. This proves nothing about me. Nothing. And as for you, Rourke, your note comes due today. Full payment by sundown, or I file seizure on the North Pasture. Caleb exploded. You can't do that. I can. Ray smiled thinly. And I will, unless Miss Bellwether turns over every scrap she stole and leaves town by nightfall. There it was, the bargain. Clara felt every eye shift toward her. The North Pasture was not just land. It was the difference between survival and ruin. Without it, the Rourkes would lose winter grazing, then cattle, then the ranch piece by piece. She had brought this threat to their door. She reached into her dress and drew out the ledger scrap from the line shack. Elias caught her wrist before she could hand it over. No, you could lose everything, she whispered. I know what everything is. You do not. His hand tightened, not hurting her, only holding her in place. I thought everything was land, because my father died chasing it. I thought everything was a paid note, a sound roof, cattle enough to last a hard winter. Then I saw a woman with one glove stand in the snow, ready to give up her name to save a child. Do not tell me what everything is. Her eyes filled, and she hated that Ray saw it. Elias turned to the sheriff. We are riding to town. Ray's smile returned. Good. She can confess there. No, Elias said. You can open your safe. The ride to town became a procession. Elias, Clara, Finn, Aunt Liddy, Caleb, Sheriff Danner, the bound scar-faced rider, 2 deputies, and half the Rourke hands moved through the snowy road while word ran ahead of them. By the time they reached Main Street, the boardwalks were lined with townspeople. Mrs. Mercer, a widow whose house Ray had nearly taken the previous spring, stood near the church steps. The livery owner came out, wiping his hands on her rag. Mr. Peavy from the depot watched from beneath his muffler. Even the saloon doors stood open, men crowding behind them. Ray dismounted before the bank, trying to look insulted instead of trapped. This is unlawful, he said. Sheriff Danner looked at the scar-faced rider, then at Finn's small pale face, then at the gathered town. For once, he seemed to understand that law and comfort were not the same thing. "Open the safe, Milton." Ray stiffened. "You have no warrant." "No," Danner said. "But I have a prisoner willing to talk, if I promise he doesn't hang alone." The scar-faced rider spat blood into the snow. "Creed kept copies. Ray kept the local notes." Ray turned on him. "Shut your mouth." But the crack had opened. Clara stepped forward. The original ledger pages list altered notes beside paid originals. "If Mr. Ray has the local copies, they will match the burned book. Rourke North Pasture, Mercer House, Church Fund, Bellwether Freight Shares. Ask him why those names sit in his safe." The town murmured. Ray tried to push into the bank. Elias blocked the door. For a moment, Clara thought the banker would draw. Instead, he looked past Elias toward the crowd, searching for fear. He had ruled Bitter Creek through quiet dread, through signatures and sealed envelopes, through the shame people felt when they owed more than they could pay. But winter has a way of stripping a town bare. A widow stepped down from the boardwalk. "Open it," Mrs. Mercer said. Then the livery owner said, "Open it." Then Mr. Peavy. Then Caleb. Then voices rose along the street until Ray stood alone in front of the bank he had built from other people's ruin. He opened the safe with shaking hands. Inside were neat bundles of notes tied in ribbon, a pistol, 3 bags of coin, and a black ledger with its spine scorched on one end. Clara saw it and could not breathe. Not the half-burned book she had hidden. The missing companion ledger. The one Creed's men had taken from the fire. Sheriff Danner lifted it out. Ray sat down hard in his own chair. For the next hour, Bitter Creek read its wounds aloud. Names appeared. Payments recorded as received in one column, denied in another. Mortgages altered after signing. Interest double. Widows charged fees that did not exist. Ranchers threatened over debts already settled. Elias's father had paid the North Pasture note 3 months before his death. Clara stood beside Elias when the sheriff read it. She felt him go very still. "I am sorry," she whispered. He looked down at the page, but his voice was not bitter when he answered, "So am I." By dusk, Milton Ray was locked in the same small jail cell where he had expected Clara to sleep. The scar-faced rider gave up Silas Creed's winter camp in exchange for a promise that the circuit judge would hear his confession. Sheriff Danner sent riders to the next county. Men who had feared Ray all their lives stood outside the bank, speaking in low, stunned voices, not yet happy, not yet healed, but breathing differently. Clara should have felt free. Instead, she felt hollow. When the crowd thinned, she found Elias behind the church, standing where the snow had drifted against the cemetery fence. His hat was in his hands. Before him stood 2 weathered markers, one for his mother and one for his father. She stopped a few paces away. "I did not mean to intrude." "You didn't. I should have trusted you sooner." He looked at the marker. "My bay. I should have given you reason sooner. You offered me your name in a letter. A name ain't safety by itself." Clara folded her arms against the cold. "What happens now? To Ray, prison if the judge has a spine. To Creed, we ride with the marshal when he comes. To the marriage letter." Elias turned then. The church bell gave a soft knock in the wind. Not a full ring, just a lonely sound from a loose rope. Clara forced herself to meet his eyes. "I answered your advertisement because I was desperate. I came with secrets. I brought danger to your ranch. I cannot let gratitude decide the rest of your life. Gratitude ain't what I feel." Her breath caught. He stepped closer, leaving enough distance that she could choose. "I will not ask you to marry me because a letter said we should. I will not ask because town tongues need quieting. And I will not ask because Finn reached for me once and it near broke my chest open." His voice roughened there, but he went on. "I am asking if you will stay through winter. No vows, no bargain. Stay because you and the boy need a roof, and because that house is better with you in it. Come spring, if you want to leave, I will put you on the train myself." Clara looked at his hands, broad and scarred, holding his hat like a nervous young man, instead of the stern cattle boss the town believed him to be. "And if I do not want to leave in spring?" she asked. He did not smile, but something in his face warmed. "Then I will ask properly." She nodded once. Tears slipped down her cheeks before she could stop them. Elias reached into his coat and pulled out one glove. Her glove, the missing one, torn dirty, rescued from the line shack after all the chaos. "Thought you might want this back," he said. Clara took it and laughed through her tears. "It is ruin. Most things worth saving looked that way at first." Winter did not end that day. Snow still came. Cattle still needed breaking ice from troughs. The stove still smoked when the wind struck wrong. Some townspeople apologized quickly, some slowly, and some only changed the subject when Clara entered the mercantile. Healing, she learned, had its own stubborn pace. But she stayed. At the Rook Ranch, she found work enough for her hands and quiet enough for her fear to loosen. She kept the accounts at the kitchen table, correcting old figures by lamplight, while Elias mended tack across from her. She taught Finn letters on a slate Aunt Liddy found in a trunk. She learned to knead bread, badly at first, then better. She learned which horse would nip, which cow would hide her calf, and which floorboard creaked outside Finn's room. Elias did not court with fancy words. He courted by rising before dawn to bring in extra wood so Clara would not wake cold. He courted by carving Finn a small wooden horse. He courted by listening when Clara woke from dreams of smoke and saying only, "You are here," until the room became the room again. Clara, in turn, courted him without meaning to. She repaired the tear in his old blue work shirt. She saved the last biscuit for him and pretended she had not. She stood beside him at the winter auction when men looked at him with pity over his father's stolen years, and she spoke clearly of the new accounts until pity turned into respect. The marshal came before Christmas with the recovered ledger and the Scarface rider's confession. Silas Greet's camp was raided in a canyon north of Bitter Creek. Cree tried to flee over a frozen pass and was caught when his horse went lame. Papers found in his wagon tied him to fraud across 3 counties and to the Denver fire. The news reached the Rock Ranch on a bright morning after 2 days of storm. The sky was hard blue, the world glittering white. Sheriff Danner rode out personally, hat in hand, looking older than he had a month before. "Miss Bellwether," he said on the porch, "Creed is taken. The Denver warrant against you has been withdrawn. Judge says your testimony will be needed, but you are no fugitive." Clara ripped the porch rail. For so long, fear had lived in her body like another heartbeat. When it stopped, she hardly knew how to stand. Finn solved that. He ran into her skirts laughing, actually laughing, the sound bright as a bell. Elias stood at the foot of the steps, watching them with snow melting on his boots. That evening after supper, Clara found him in the barn. Lantern light made gold of the straw. Horses shifted in their stalls. Outside, the wind moved soft over the roof, no longer screaming, only passing through. "I do not want to wait until spring," Clara said. Elias turned from hanging a bridle. "For what?" "For you asked properly." He looked at her a long moment. "Clara, be certain. I have been uncertain for years about where to go, who to trust, whether I would wake to another locked door or another accusation. I am not uncertain about this." She stepped closer. "You did not save me once and call it love. You kept choosing me when choosing me cost you something. I know the difference." His eyes shone in the lantern light, though his voice stayed low. "And Finn asked yesterday if your house could be our house even when the snow melts." Elias looked down, his breath leaving him slowly. Then he reached into his vest pocket and drew out the original marriage letter, folded along its old lines. I wrote this thinking I needed a wife who did not frighten easy, he said. I was a fool, Clara smiled. Were you? Yes, everyone frightens. Courage is what they do after. He took her hand, the one that had been bare in the depot yard, and held it between both of his. Clara Bellwether, will you make a home with me? Not because of a bargain, not because of danger, not because any town expects it. Will you marry me because you believe we can build something honest from what was burned? She answered before fear could dress itself as caution. Yes, the wedding was small because winter roads were poor. But the church was full anyway. Mrs. Mercer brought pine boughs. Mr. Peavy rang the bell. Caleb stood beside Elias, solemn until Finn, polished and combed within an inch of rebellion, whispered something that made him cough to hide a laugh. And Liddy cried openly and threatened anyone who noticed. Clara wore a simple blue dress, not white. She said she wanted no costume of innocence, only something true. Elias looked at her as if blue had become the finest color in the world. When the preacher asked who gave her, Finn stepped forward before anyone could stop him. I do, he said. The church went soft with smiles. Elias bent and whispered, Finn, I will take good care of both of you. Finn nodded, satisfied. Afterward, the town gathered outside under a pale winter sun. There were still debts to untangle, land claims to restore, apologies to make. Bitter Creek had not become perfect because one ledger opened. But something crooked had been named, and once a crooked thing is named, honest people can begin the hard work of straightening it. Clara stood beside Elias at the church steps while the wind lifted the edge of her veil. Across the street, near the depot, snow had covered the yard, fresh and clean. She could see, in her mind, the place where she had crouched with one glove, where fear had told her to run, where the wind had revealed the print of a child's boot and a scrap of burned truth. Elias followed her gaze, thinking of the deep pot, he asked. Yes, bad memory. Clara leaned into his side. Finn ran ahead of them, boots punching small stars into the snow. No, she said after a moment. Heart memory, that is different. They walked home as the sun lowered behind the white ridges. Their tracks stretched behind them along the road. Elias's deep boot marks, Clara's lighter ones beside his, and Finn's small prints darting between, circling, returning, never lost for long. The winter wind moved over those footprints, but it did not erase them. It only softened the edges, shining around each mark like silver. And in the rook hearth that night, the last useless ashes of the burned ledger lolled and faded, while the truth it had carried lived on in land restored, names cleared, a boy's voice returned, and a mail-order bride who had finally stopped running because she had found a home strong enough to hold her.